All right, welcome to Roots of Reality Experiences. Today I'm joined by Robert Holmes, who was a founding member and lead guitarist for the 1980s band Til Tuesday. Til Tuesday was most famous for the song Voices Carry that reached number 8 on the Billboard Hot 100 and has over 50 million plays on Spotify. So, Robert, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
So, just starting off, when did you first get interested in music?
I was born wanting to play music. I saw the Beatles on television when I was born in England, and then moved to the United States when I was 8. But prior to that, I had seen the Beatles on television, and also went to a music shop with my parents. I think they were auditioning Sergeant Pepper's. You could stand and listen in a booth and see
Oh,
if you
wow.
wanted decide to buy the record, and they had guitars for sale. And I remember the salesman showing a guitar to somebody else and strumming the strings, and me turning to my mother and saying, "Mummy, you know, like there it is. That's what I want to do." And so I got a ukulele when I was 7, and then a guitar when I was 10, electric guitar when I was 12. It's
Wow.
been a lifelong thing.
And so your parents were always very supportive then of your
Yes,
music
they were. They were both actors
Oh, okay, perfect. All right.
initially, anyway.
So the arts was in the family from the
Yeah,
beginning.
absolutely it was.
That's
Yes.
great. So how did, the move from England to the United States sort of impact your musical development as a kid?
It was a big deal. Into the Beatles. I saw Jimi Hendrix on television on Top of the Pops in England. So we moved to the United States in 1967, and immediately was listening to music. So that meant that I got exposed to the sort of American playlists. There's a lot of bands that kind of didn't really make that much of an impact in the UK that I was exposed to from moving to America.
Yeah. So like who were you listening to then in the United States versus in England? Obviously the Beatles in England, but you
Yeah,
were
the Bee Gees in England. I was really into T-Rex,
yep.
The Sweet, Slade,
Okay.
and then in America it became Deep Purple. Um, well, 10 years after the English band. Um, Bowie was an American thing. I mean, that's what I got exposed to Bowie in America anyway.
Okay.
And then American bands, just the whole sort of 70s, Bob Seger, Eagles,
Yep.
FM radio, all of that. I grew up on FM radio.
Yeah, that's cool. So, when you started to develop a career in music and you're pursuing this career, what was the 1980s music scene like when you first entered into that scene?
Well, I was probably about, well, I would join my first band when I was 13.
Okay.
And I was in that band for 10 years, from age 13 to 23. And we were trying to make it.
Yeah.
And we were quite organized. We always had a house that we rented. They were all older than me, sort of 4 years older. So when I joined the band, they were 18.
Okay.
And it was through my older sister's boyfriend's brother.
Okay.
They thought I was sort of a gimmick.
Yeah.
And they say, from London, England, Bobby Holmes on guitar. And so that was a very serious band, and we wanted to be like Deep Purple and sort of Cheap Trick. And who else did we want to be like? We wanted to be like Queen too. I was a
Okay.
big Queen fan. But so we had a rehearsal space where we started recording. We were making our own demos. We had an 8-track recorder that which was pretty advanced for sort of 1977, 1978, to have your own recording setup.
Yeah.
And so we had started our first 5 years. We were a cover band, and then we decided we needed to make it. We were going to write our own material, and so we just started writing and learning to record and making demos. And the whole thing then was pitch to a major label, or try to find management or sometimes attorneys that would pitch you to get a door opened. The whole trick was get your cassette onto the desk of a record executive and try to get a record deal. That's what we were aiming for. And so did that for 10 years with that band. And then left that band. It wasn't really happening, and me leaving basically broke it up.
Okay.
And there was a lot of anger on their behalf. They tried to sue me, and there was,
Wow.
people had borrowed money from their parents to keep the thing afloat, myself included. Um, and we had a rehearsal space that we rented. We had signed a lease on and everything, but the leader of the band was just not somebody that I really resonated well with, even though he had been a sort of childhood mentor of sorts.
Sure.
We had just grown apart enough that I was ready to do my own thing. So I left that band and met Amy. And I was extremely aggressive because I had just come from a very organized band that had a rehearsal space and recording studio and gigs booked. We had a van, we had a bus, we had a road crew, we had a phone line that you could call to find out where we were playing.
Wow.
And Amy and Michael, the drummer, was in another band at the time, and they were boyfriend and girlfriend. And it was just Amy and and we just I met her at a party. And I had gone to the party specifically to try to meet people to start a band with.
Yeah.
I was very, very focused on it. And she said, "Oh, well, I've got some recording time that's due me. We should get together and try to do something." Because she said she was into doing funk music at the time,
Okay.
and that's what I was. I was always into dance music, so I was like, "Yeah, funk band, great." And so she eventually called, and I felt like it was taking too long. I expected her to call in 2 days, after the weekend. Sort of took a week or so for her to call. And so we got together and we used Michael, her boyfriend, who was a percussion player in another band, and the keyboard player from that band also. And we got together, we wrote 3 songs, and we went in and recorded them. And then that sort of got things going. Then we managed to lure Michael away from that band, and then we found our own keyboard player. And probably within a year, we had a major record deal.
Wow. So, what was that process like then for you? You're trying to find other musicians to work with at a party. Did you have people in mind that you kind of knew sort of their talent, or were you just kind of
No, the person who had whose party it was, this guy Stephen Fredette, who was in a band called Scruffy the Cat, who they had some sort of minor success. They were a Boston band, and I knew that his roommates were musicians, and at the time I was living outside of Boston, and I went into town specifically to go to the party with the idea of networking in mind. And I had previously seen Amy around town, and she had been pointed out to me because one of the guys that was the singer in my band that I was in for 10 years, he was the singer for the first 5 years, was dating Amy for 10 minutes. And
okay?
so somebody had pointed out, "Oh, that's Amy, that's Jace's girlfriend, and she plays bass in a band called the Young Snakes." So when I saw her at the party, I twigged bass player, and I had been looking for either a bass player or a drummer. That's who I thought I would get along best with to sort of start a band.
Sure.
And so when I met Amy, she was just like, "Oh, well, yeah, I play bass." And she didn't graduate Berkeley, but she had gone to Berkeley College of Music. And I was pretty aggressive. I wanted to, I was like, "Yeah, let's do it." That's I wanted,
Yeah.
I was all
Sure.
pumped.
Wow, that's interesting. And so, okay, once you guys have formed as a group, what was the process like to, creating the song Voices Carry? Were you like, how long did it take for you guys to feel like you had something that could become very
Um,
successful?
yeah, we started writing immediately, Amy and I, like the 3 songs that we recorded with the very first lineup, where it was really, we didn't have a band yet. And it was just before we had managed to lure Michael, the drummer, away. And then as soon as we had Michael and then we got Joey, the keyboard player, we immediately were rehearsing probably 3 nights a week. And we were writing at those rehearsals. And we wrote very quickly. Joey had lots of ideas. I had ideas. Amy was very quick. She was really good at words, writing them down on napkins and things. And we would get together. Would get together at a rehearsal and would come up with 2 or 3 songs in the space of rehearsal. And probably like everything on our first record was probably written within a few months of just getting together and writing. And it was an aggressive plan. Like, we are going to do this. We're going to
Right.
We're going to get a record deal. We're going to get management. We're going to get on gigs. You know, we definitely had an idea in mind of how we wanted to look. You know, it was very much of a thing in choosing band members. It would be like, well, that guy wears, you know, brown leather pants. That's not going to, you know, that we had a look in mind.
Yeah. Wow.
And so our first photos looked really good. And we had already discussed what we should wear on stage, you know, that kind of stuff. And, you know, it was a plan. We had a
Yeah.
plan.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty detailed plan at every sort of step of the way in mind. And so do you remember then the first time you heard your band on the radio?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
What was that like and where were you?
Oh, it was really cool. Well, we had just won, I think the first gig that we did was opening for the band that Michael had been the percussion player in. And we opened for them at the Channel in Boston, which is a big venue. And then the second gig we did opening at a place called Storyville for a band from New York. And there was already a buzz about us in town. And so we had no problem getting gigs. And then within about 6 months, we were invited to join the local radio station's Battle of the Bands, the WBCN Rock and Roll Rumble, and we won. We didn't even have enough material to play 2 sets, so we repeated songs in our second.
Wow.
We did 2 sets. We just repeated songs. We had about 8 or 9 songs. And
Man.
at that point, this is only sort of 6 months into the band, we already had management, and we were in the studio at the time with a proper producer, engineer, recording, and we left those recording sessions to go and play our final winning set at the Rumble, which we won. And then we got back into the cars, drove back to the studio, finished doing our recording, and then they immediately got the tape on the radio. It was a demo of the song the song Love in a Vacuum.
Okay.
And the engineer producer was this guy named Ian Taylor, who had worked with, he had a good career after that, but he had worked with Ministry, who were doing their first album in Boston. And that's where Amy met them. She sort of used to hang out at Synchro Sound a little bit. She had a crush on Al Jorgenstern, the leader of Ministry.
Okay.
And we got that on the air almost immediately because we just won the local radio.
Yeah.
And that at the time, local radio was very much into supporting local bands. You know,
Right.
it was, you could schmooze them and you could get played on there. They would have sort of Sunday nights, they would play local stuff, and they would mix in your tracks with the sort of regular playlists.
Yeah.
Which is a huge positive. They really, really helped break our band.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so, after you've had that sort of initial success, what were you thinking was next for the band? Did you
record label on a major
Okay.
record deal on a major label? And we had managers at that point who had seen us. They had heard the buzz. They came to see us. We had already approached a few different management companies. The Cars were sort of the template for a successful band in Boston because they had just released their first record, which is a huge hit,
Right.
produced by Roy Thomas Baker, and they had proper management. We pitched to their management, got their contact details through Rick Ocasek, who sort of took somewhat of an interest in us. And, people were sort of thinking, okay, they're probably going to get a deal. And, people like Rick Ocasek would have wanted to have a shot at producing us, kind of thing.
Sure.
And we got passed on first time around. It was hard to get major labels. We had a few rejection letters from, and our managers were pitching and bringing people to come and see us live. We play in clubs. And then eventually Epic, they were interested in us, and they had a staff producer, John Boylan, who had quite a successful career. He was in Linda Ronstadt's band way back in the day, and he produced Little River Band. He produced the first Boston album.
Oh, wow.
Even though that record was pretty much produced
Sure.
already, he was a staff producer, and they sent him out to do a session with us at Synchro Sound to sort of make sure that we could cut it. And I think the label was a little bit nervous about Amy's lead vocals and thought, is she really a lead singer material, you know? And so they sort of sent him out to do demos with us to scope it out. And he came back with a thumbs up. Yes, you know, they can cut it in the studio. And then we got a record deal.
That's amazing. And so, you know,
when we got our record deal, we signed it on the air at WBCM, the radio station, Battle of the Bands. We won. We were very much tied in with them, and they very much helped break the band.
That's awesome. It's cool to have that sort of coming from a location and being able to grow with that location. And yeah, it's
big
special.
Fish in a little pond is really a magic combination.
Definitely. So, you know, when the song Voices Carry was created, you know, did you know that was going to be a hit when you guys were working on building it?
No, we didn't. It was a phrase that Joey had said at rehearsal. He said something like, yeah, well, people said somebody heard something, you know, voices carry. And Amy has that kind of brain where she was like, voices carry, great time. And we wrote it really quickly.
Yeah.
You know, that was sort of during this particular time period where we just wrote everything really. We would get together and write as a band, which of course stopped as soon as, you know, we got some success. So it was just sort of initial, and we had a lot of stuff, and it was very funky and very danceable. That was kind of where I thought we were going.
Yeah.
And Voices Carry was originally written from Amy's point of view about a woman. And it was sort of like, you know, keep it down now, you know, having a relationship with a woman was kind of not something people talked about.
Sure.
And they were sending producers out to come and see us live. And Mike Thorne, who wound up producing our first record, said, hey, I really like that one song of yours, Voices Carry. And Epic sent us into the studio, not with him, the same place we had originally done our first demo, just a little demo place in Boston called Perfect Crime. And we just basically played our live set so that they had a cassette of 15 songs that they could listen to. And Voices Carry was on there. And the label said, we like Voices Carry, but we think you should change the subject matter. Singing about a woman is a little bit too risque.
Okay. Yeah.
Pop radio.
Right.
And Cyndi Lauper wanted to do that song. She had just had her first record out. She was on Epic.
Wow.
And she wanted to do the song. And she had said, I think Amy's very brave, you know, because she thought that it was a lesbian love song. Amy wasn't gay. It was just Amy was just writing from that point of view for whatever reason.
Right.
And anyway, we were sort of quite cocky and said, no, we're going to keep it for ourselves. Thank you. We'll do it ourselves. Yeah. Amy rewrote the lyrics, and they said, yeah, we think this is going to be the first single. We just thought, wow, we had other songs that we thought were much more poppy. Yeah. And the label didn't really, I think, in conjunction with Mike Thorne, they weren't too crazy about the funky dance stuff that we were doing. They preferred more of the rock, sort of more sort of straight ahead rock stuff. And not rock, but, you know, new wave rock.
Right, sure.
And so we were sort of nudged more into that direction.
Wow.
And we made our first record.
Yeah. Well, I guess it was a good thing that you guys held on to that song and decided to do it yourself.
Yes, yeah. They considered it to be sort of cocky. And because I suppose because Cyndi Lauper had just had, you know, just sold like 8 million copies of her debut record. So anything that got on her record was going to be, at least it was going to pay off.
Right.
Because the way they split royalties up, they sort of do it all sort of evenly. The sort of mechanical royalties are split evenly.
Right.
So we would have got a big payday one way or another, even if the record went straight into the toilet, you know.
Yeah.
But we felt quite, you know, it's just a sort of confident 23-year-old, you know, no, we're doing our own thing, you know, you know, we were just sort of blissfully ignorant and threw ourselves into it. And yes, it was obviously a great turnout because we didn't really have any other hits, you know.
Well, I mean, the amazing thing about music and bands, just, you know, I mean, there's so many groups that may have like a you know, a somewhat popular song, but to have like a really big, like super hit is very hard in the first place. So
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many bands that are easily forgotten that, had decent music, but nothing that really took off. So it's just
Yeah.
amazing, just the fact that you guys had that song.
And it was our first single on our
Yeah,
first
yeah,
record. And so we were just feeling like, yes, yes, and yep, okay, yep, we're having a hit. Yep. What's next? We
right.
didn't we didn't really think of it as being that special. I remember getting the phone call from our manager saying, well, this week it's gonna go, the record's gone to the top 10. I was like, great, that's great, yeah, excellent. And I remember hanging up and saying to my wife, yeah, so the record's being in the top 10. And she was like, well, what does that mean? Is that good? Or it's like, yeah, it's pretty good. You don't really realize at the time that this is going to change.
Yes,
This song will be with me now for the rest of my life. I'll be
right.
Robert Carey Holmes.
Yeah,
You don't have
that
that sense.
that is funny. That's right. Yeah, how things change over time when you look back at them. Was there another song that you thought like was gonna be a hit that
Yeah, I
didn't work
thought that
out?
I thought both the follow up to that one, Looking Over My Shoulder, seemed like it was more hit like, and they had it remixed. Bob Clearmountain remixed it and everything. That didn't really happen. And then I thought Love in a Vacuum would have been a big hit too.
Sure.
And that didn't really happen either.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Um, I guess it's kind of hard to know really what's gonna click with people and what's not, and
Yeah.
yeah, sort of how that process works. It's also fascinating just how quickly a lot of these songs are kind of written down in the first place. It's not some long drawn out process of going back and forth, like it's just kind of okay, something in your mind that you just put out there, and it just comes together. I guess all at once.
Yes, very quick. Yeah.
That's
Yeah, it
fascinating.
certainly was done in the space of a rehearsal,
Yeah. Yeah, that's wild. I just
along with a bunch of others.
yeah, it just takes, I guess, one moment of having a clear vision for a song, and it just takes off from there. Um, what do you think then, when you're reflecting on the music scene in the 1980s and your work, what do you think was the main difference between the 1980s era versus music prior?
Hmm. Um, well, I think that we were sort of at the beginning of bands that were thinking, I'm going to write a hit. Now, I suppose there were probably other bands that were focused on writing hits. Well, I mean, I felt like we were focused on writing hits. Like I was definitely thinking, I want to have hits.
Sure.
Um, the 80s, it seemed like, yeah, when I listen back to 80s music and I just hear all the drum machines and the quantized keyboards and big gated snare drums, it's a little bit cringy to me. But at the time, it just seemed like it was very sort of futuristic sounding, like we're doing
Yes.
music that
Yes.
sounds like the future.
Yes.
Like Der Kommissar seems like the kind of that's really sort of quintessential 80s to me, sort of cleverly recorded. It wasn't really like a live performance of a band captured in the studio so much as it was a crafted, pastiche of ear candy.
Sure.
But I mean, Till Tuesday was more like a band captured in the studio. The Voices Carry, that was basically a live take. The Certainly the drums, bass, and guitar were live in the
Sure.
studio. Whereas later stuff was all sort of much more painstakingly assembled.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, yeah, I've always found that 80s music tends to have that particular, yeah, I know kind of the how people envision a futuristic sound would be like with almost like a sort of techno type beat to a certain
Yeah,
extent. And I can always pick out a song from the 80s whenever I hear that sound, like, oh, that's an 80s song. So,
yeah.
um, how do you think then music has changed since the 1980s?
Well, I think there was I think after the 80s, people went to a much more organic approach. The whole sort of Lindrum sequenced keyboards, that kind of dead or alive. You spin me right round, sort of fast, you know, synths that were keyed in with drum machines and stuff. That whole sort of sound kind of fell by the wayside, and then it got more sort of Pearl Jammy, the whole kind of grunge thing was more like rock bands
Sure.
actually sort of getting back to live performances and sort of inspired. That it's much closer to the Rolling Stones than it is, Paula Abdul.
Right. Yeah, that's true. So do you relate to music today? Do you like how it's kind of evolved over time, or do you feel like you kind of miss aspects of what music was like, prior? Or
I don't really miss the 80s vibe of music.
okay,
The heavily gated snare drums and stuff. I mean, I guess for music that I want to make myself, I prefer a more kind of well, I don't know. I mean, I'm a guitar player, so the stuff that I actually play and write and get involved in is sort of different from the stuff that I listen to. I don't
sure,
ever really like listen to rock music for pleasure,
okay,
but I enjoy creating it. And I can play it,
yeah,
and I like to play with bands. I like the energy of playing with a real drummer and a real bass player, and an actual performance and a human groove is more pleasurable to me than a sort of assembled wall of sound.
okay,
Um, I don't feel nostalgic. I feel like 80s music is quite cringy to me in a lot of ways. I mean, there are
okay,
definitely some real bands,
sure,
U2 and In Excess, bands that, made records that I think, stood up and sound great, but that sort of poppy um kind of the whole what's the who are the three producers? Something something on Waterman, the English sort of.
oh,
I guess is that 80s or 90s?
trying to remember.
Like the Rick, what's his name? Astley
Oh,
was
yes,
one.
yes.
Something Akins and Waterman. The famous trio of producer, songwriter,
I
engineers.
I vaguely know. Yeah, can't remember off the top of my head.
But when I hear that stuff, I think, oh, it sounds very much
Yeah.
of the
Sure,
era. It
sure.
doesn't it doesn't like hold up like, oh, I just want to put headphones on and get lost in listening to it.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I understand what you mean. Yeah, there are definitely songs that don't really translate over time well,
Yeah.
and yeah, just kind of disappear, I suppose, as a result of that.
And there was tons of great music too, really
Yeah.
tons of great records. I mean, I really loved Roxy Music. I particularly loved the Avalon album.
Yep.
And that's why we wound up working with Rhett Davies on our second and third records, because I was in love with Avalon.
Sure.
Just loved the production. But that was a real band. There was a real performance in there. Real drums, real bass playing, real guitars.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what do you think then? Like when you're looking at that era in general, like what do you think has been the biggest contribution from the 1980s style that still persists today or has influenced what is going on today?
Well, like Tears for Fears, that kind of attention to, well, I guess people like Fleetwood Mac did it in the 70s, but really well crafted recordings of actual bands.
Okay.
That and like Talk and people like that. But yeah, that sort of sowing the seeds of love energy, really beautifully crafted recordings that people, they took a long time to do.
Yeah.
And they auditioned different drummers for parts and just, really chased down a feel and really, dotted their I's and crossed their T's on all the parts. That seems like a very 80s kind of a head from recording that. I don't know whether or not it's continued. I mean, that's some people are much more haphazard in their recording approaches, but that feels very 80s to me when I think, yes, that sort of crafting of a recording.
Yeah.
I'm sure they were doing it in the 70s, but that I wasn't really making records in the 70s, so I
Sure.
wasn't that aware of it. But I just remember that being there was more of a sort of approach to crafting recordings than there was dangling some mics in a room and capturing, like the Zeppelin thing is like a different vibe from Tears for Fears.
Yes. Yes, Tears for Fears is still, I know, regularly played on the radio all the time, and seems to be
They're
have lasting power. So,
super good sounding records, just
yeah,
beautifully produced, and yeah, they've really held up.
yeah. I mean, I still hear Voices Carry a lot in on the radio, and like in stores will pop on, and
Yeah.
so it
I've
is
heard it when
cool.
I've been in America, but I never hear it. It didn't do any business in the UK.
That's interesting. That's
So
interesting.
I
Wow.
never ever hear it. Nobody knows it.
Wow, that is wild to me. Okay. So so whenever you tell people like, "Oh yeah, the voice this song was really big hit in the
Yeah,
US," like what
they have
song?
no. It's
Like
like,
what's
no,
that?
no, no. And I'll say Amy Mann. Have you ever heard of Amy Mann? Sometimes they've heard of Amy Mann.
Wow.
Sometimes they've heard of Magnolia, the film. That's the sort of jumping off point. You say, okay, well, have you heard of Magnolia? Yeah, well, she did the songs for that. So yeah, I think because I think Amy actually lived in London for a while,
Okay.
for a couple of years or something.
Yeah, I think
So
I recall
probably
reading that. Yeah.
she sort of was around gigging and things. So
Wow.
I've
That's
had
interesting.
some a booking agent guy at a local venue said to me, "Oh yeah, you were Amy Mann's guitar player." And I said, "Well, actually, we were in a band together before she was Amy Mann,
Right.
who had a guitar player. We were just an actual band called Till Tuesday. It wasn't like I was,
Like yeah,
you know, her guitar
performing
player."
as part of her like solo act.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what he imagined, was where I
Wow.
came from. People had said, "Hey, Amy Mann."
Wow. Well,
So sometimes as a joke, I'll call myself Robert Amy Mann Holmes.
well, at least in America, people remember remember your
Yeah,
work in the
that's
band.
it's all good.
Yeah. I mean, it's yeah, I definitely hear it all the time. And honestly, I mean, from my perspective, I did not grow up in the 80s, but that's one of the main 80s songs that I remember, when I think about music from the 80s, like that's one of the iconic hits just because I mean the sound to me is just timeless. It's just, such a great sound for the song. So it's just yeah, pretty impressive. I mean, I've played that song like in my car or something like that and have people that are not familiar with music in the 1980s like, oh, what's that song? Like that's a good sound.
Hmm.
So it's definitely something that I think will continue on for years to come in the US as
Yeah,
being
that's great. It's really
something.
delightful. Rick Beato actually gave it an honorable mention in one of his bits about great songs of the 80s.
Yeah,
Which that my English mates who have really had never heard it until the guys that I play in bands with never heard it until it was like, oh yeah, didn't you used to be in somebody's band? And say yes, I'll sort of Google it and hold up a phone. I say, look at the listens, look millions of hits. They're
yeah.
like, oh yeah, okay, yeah. And then so Rick Beato coming up with it is like, oh, it gives it a little bit of credibility.
Yeah, that's fascinating, I guess. Yeah, it just shows how I mean, and there have been I know there's been groups in I think there's been some American bands that might have had more success in Europe and different places or I know there's been groups that were not popular at all even in sort of Western Europe or the United States, but were super popular in Eastern Europe, like Boney M or something. Uh,
Right, yeah.
and it's just like my wife's from Eastern Europe, and so I'll hear music. She's like, "Oh, it's a German group. Like you haven't heard this? Like, I have no idea who this is." And it was super popular though in the Eastern world. So it's just kind of funny how music can kind of be stuck in geographical boundaries, I guess.
Absolutely. I've had this experience in the UK where um, at the end of a gig, they're playing a song and everyone is singing it. And I've never heard it before. They're all, it's like a sing along that it twigged this whole generation of people like, oh, this is our song. And I think that I'm somebody that's listened to lots of music. I imagine
Right.
that I would be aware of it. It's like, I've never heard this before. And they all know it.
Yeah. No, I'm having that experience probably like once a year. There's some European group that I'd never heard of in my entire life that my wife will play. I'm like, who is this? Like, how do you not know who this is? I think like another one was like Modern Talking, a group that had a few big hits that were super popular in Eastern Europe, and I was just I think that they're a group that I think was formed in somewhere in Western Europe, but I just had no idea who they were, and
Yeah.
they become popular. So it's interesting, but it's good to. I mean, I think that's one of the cool things is that kind of rediscovery process where you find music that you didn't get to hear on the radio, perhaps that you can then hear for the first time. So, um, but yeah, interesting things. I guess now with the internet, it's easier to probably come across stuff that you might have missed.
Yes. And also I've every now and then I'll do sort of a gig with a function band filling in for somebody. And they'll tell me these songs and I don't even, I'm listening to them, learning them for the first time. And so it's not like easy for me because, if you've heard a song your whole life, I can probably play it without actually having to learn it. But if
Right.
it's like Spandau Ballet B cut, that I've never heard before, it's like I've got to learn it. I've got to like get familiar with the song first before I can even start to figure out how to play it. You can't,
Right.
I'm not going to read a chart.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely has to be difficult.
It
I mean,
hurts. Yeah, it
yeah.
hurts. There's quite a few songs like that were huge hits over here. Bands that were huge hits.
Yeah.
That and the 80s stuff too.
Yeah.
That like you would think ABC. Do you know the band ABC? You probably know The Look of Love. The Look of Love. So like
That sounds familiar. I'm not like super familiar with it, but
you would think that they were like the Beatles over here. I mean, everybody's familiar with all these sort of B cuts, B sides, and
yeah.
like there's all these other tracks that they did that were hits.
Wow.
Where I think of them as just being a one-hit wonder. Like, yeah, I remember The Look of Love.
Right. Right. Yeah. Geez. I mean, and I didn't really realize how isolated sort of the music space in the UK and the US could be, where you could have that happen
Yeah.
so often. That is fascinating, because I always kind of figured that music was coming across to each other back and forth. Um,
Yes.
so very surprising.
And there are entire major American artists that I will mention to people, and they have no clue about.
Wow. Okay. Jeez. Well, that's
Bob Seger.
Bob Seger is just yeah totally unknown.
Yeah, you mentioned Bob Seger, and people go, no, I don't know who that is.
That's amazing. Wow. Okay. Jeez. Well, I
Jay
never
Giles
guessed that.
band. They know Centerfold, but like
Okay.
Jay Giles, coming from Boston, Jay Giles band were they were like the like party,
Right. Yeah.
no awareness of them really. Centerfold they've heard.
Yeah. That's interesting. Wow. Well, yeah, I guess just shows that music can be kind of isolated.
Yeah.
So, what are you listening to today then? What music? What modern music are you listening to?
Um, well, let me see. I mean, I don't the stuff I will listen to. There's a radio station here called BBC Radio Music 6,
Okay.
and they play all sorts of new stuff, and then they play old stuff, but it's a lot of new stuff. And I'll just put that on when I'm working, and if there's stuff that I really like, I'll Shazam it
Oh,
if I
yes.
don't
Yep.
get the DJ. But I don't, like the idea of actually going down and really hunting these bands down and checking them out. There's only been a sort of few that I've thought, oh, like, there's this one band called Swim Deep
Okay.
that you probably would have never heard of. There's sort of but it's just like you hear one track and you think, oh, I kind of like that. And then I'll remember it enough to, say, hey, Google, play, Swim Deep.
Sure.
But I'll just let that play, and then I'll sort of hear the stuff. But it's like it's gone. It's gone beyond that, beyond the sort of reading liner notes, remembering song titles, even remembering who names of bands are. You'll sort of spit them out, and
Right.
then you forget about them and move on. But I've heard a lot of great stuff. I know that people are still making really good music. I've
Yeah.
heard really good stuff on BBC Radio 6, and a lot of it really unusual, where I think I would not think to write this.
Yeah.
I would not put this together. It's outside of my, they're looking at songs and chord structures and melodies and how stuff's assembled in a completely different way. And it's, you know, a lot of it's really, really good. I've heard
Yeah.
some really good stuff. I'm at a loss to start naming off names of bands.
Right. Well, I mean, it is interesting to see sort of how things have changed. I mean, rapidly, especially as Shazam obviously is an incredible tool now for finding music. It's a go-to tool for anyone who's interested in knowing a song. But you know, I know in the United States, one thing that's changed drastically because I mean, I grew up in the with the '90s and 2000s music, kind of being the music of my childhood. And I've noticed already, like on the radio, people don't listen to the radio as much in the United States. So they're basically playing the same songs over and over again.
Yeah.
And so to really discover music, it seems like unless you're listening to like some of the major pop stations that will always break through on the radio, but it almost seems like finding stuff just on like Instagram seems to be a place where a lot of bands
Right.
in
Yeah.
the United States are growing very popular that you'll never hear on the radio. They could have 1 million followers or something on Instagram.
Right. Yeah. Actually, I just thought of one that I went down a rabbit hole for was Krungabin. Is that how you pronounce it?
Krungle Band.
Karungabin.
Krung-
They're
Not
from
sure.
Texas. They're a power trio. He plays guitar. There's a woman playing bass. They've got
I
a
don't think I've
drummer.
ever heard of them. Yeah.
It's like, you know, you'll go on there and you'll find them on YouTube and there'll be, you know, hundreds of thousands of views.
Wow. Yeah. I
It's,
mean,
I think it's largely instrumental, but it's sort of, it's great stuff. And
yeah.
so, and then you can get Spotify to play. The algorithms are fabulous. You know,
Oh,
they
yes.
like this, we would like this, and this. Like, yes, I like it all. You've got me.
That's right.
Go
Yeah.
ahead, just play. You know.
Yeah, it's kind of opened up the different ways I guess you could come across new music now because yeah, especially the logarithms. You just put in one song that you know that you have heard recently and then it's to start punching out other songs constantly similar to it. So yeah, kind of changes the game quite a bit.
That makes it so much easier. I mean, I feel guilty for using Spotify, but here we
Well,
are.
yeah, it's
I'm a
what
music fan. You know.
that's true. It's one of the ways to listen. So no. So when you reflect then on your career, what would you say was your proudest moment as a musician?
I think my proudest moments have been in the last sort of 2 years, really.
Okay, wow.
I feel like I'm way, way better as a musician, as a musical entity now than I ever was. I just feel like, you know, when I look back at the past, I feel a little bit cringy and like, I wish I,
Yeah,
you know, and just, you know, the kind of decisions that you make and you take it, you're very intense when you're in your 20s and you're,
sure.
you know, like the way that the sort of band fell apart, the personalities, the things we didn't talk about, the things we did talk about, the stuff that you worried about, that,
Yeah,
you know, we should have just should a lot of it should have just not been a worry, and we should have just focused on writing and recording and making good music, you know.
yeah,
So I mean, I've had some moments, you know, there are a handful of tracks that I'll go back to. There's one track on the last Till Tuesday record that almost nobody ever listens to, called Long Gone Buddy, that I always really liked.
yeah,
Um, and but like any other stuff, don't ever really listen to. There's a couple of sessions for some bands that I did that I enjoyed listening to recently. A band called from Boston called The Beloved Few. They were a duo, and we made one record. They did it with just all local Boston people, but it's really good.
yeah.
And you know, there's a couple things here and there that I forget about. I didn't have a CD player for a long time, and I left a load of CDs and cassettes in the United States when I moved. And then my sister recently sent me a big box of stuff because the house that the stuff was being stored in got sold. And it was like, should we throw away all the stuff or can we ship it to you? So they shipped it to me at no small expense, let me say.
I bet.
And so then I had a stack of CDs that I had completely forgotten about was stuff that I played on. And so on long car journeys, I would listen to all these CDs, and you know, most of it wasn't really any good to
Okay.
me.
Yeah,
And I listen to stuff that I did in the past, and I don't think that it's really any good. You know, I think it's okay. And then I had cassettes of
yeah,
all early song ideas and things that from way back in the day, pre Til Tuesday, and then like during Til Tuesday, and then there were like a load of Til Tuesday live gigs and rehearsal tapes, and just most of it, I was just thinking, it's not really that good.
That's funny. Just shows
So
how
I,
things
I
change.
feel a little cringy about the whole sort of
Yeah.
past
Yeah.
thing.
That's fascinating. Well, I guess, things change, and over time you kind of reflect on things differently as a result of that. I mean, I know you were on national television in the US many times performing with Till Tuesday. So you guys had quite a ride
Yeah,
of
yeah.
attention. So it's pretty interesting. But what are you currently working on then?
Well, I play in three bands. Um, Two of them are original. One of them is a cover band doing stuff that only we want to do, and it's just sort of a fun
Sure.
kind of money-making thing. We only play a handful of places, but when we do play them, it's really fun, and the people that like us really like us.
That's
And
cool.
that's like a power trio rock, you
Yeah.
know, guitar fest kind of thing. So that's like not really a serious band. Then the other two bands, one is called the Achievers, and it's like a lot of fun. They're really fun guys, and it's the guy that runs the band is very, very good at making things happen. So we've played all over Europe. He booked a tour in Spain for 2 weeks. We
Oh,
played in
wow.
the US. We won a UK blues competition. We're not even really a blues band, but
Wow.
he was like, "Hey, this is a place that we could get in. Can we do some blues music? Can you play blues? So we said like did some of that stuff, did that thing, won the competition, then got played over in Memphis at the finals and everything, and we used that as a springboard to book loads of other gigs. So we've been all over. We're going to Belgium in July, and then we're going to the Netherlands probably in November again. And we've already been to the Netherlands, and we've been all over.
Wow.
We went to Croatia last year,
Jeez.
and he'll just book, sort of 5 club dates or something, and they will provide, food and lodging and some money, and then we sell merch. So it's basically a sort of break even, have a really fun music playing holiday. The band is good,
Yeah.
but it's we have 4 people sing, so we've got good harmonies and stuff. But it's quite a lazy band musically. There's not, when we get together to rehearse, there's sort of, there'll be like an hour and a half of chit chat and joking, and then like maybe half an hour of actually playing. And of the recordings that we've done, all of them have been live. It's just been
Okay.
like, oh, by the way, we're going to be in such and such a place, and we need a place to stay for the night, and there's a residential studio. So I thought we'd book a day over in the studio. We can go in and just play our set live, and then next thing you know, it's an album that's been released.
Wow.
So it's not like it's completely the other side of the sort of crafting, kind of careful thing that I have enjoyed doing. So I do that sort of by myself, at home on this very laptop via
Yeah.
Logic, and I sort of put out maybe a song every 2 months or something,
Okay. Jeez.
and I really, really enjoy that. But I'd have no hopes of anything. I'm just doing it to do it. It's
Sure.
not. I
Sure.
don't have any aspirations of. I mean, it would be a great fantasy to get something used on a film or something, but
Sure.
I'm not going to take any steps to try to push it forward. I only just put them up on Bandcamp. Otherwise, I was exclusively just on SoundCloud. And
Okay. Yeah.
so I was doing that. And then the other band that I play with is called Albino Tarantino, and that's the drummer for the band The Achievers that tours all over the place. And he is a very good singer-songwriter in his own right. He's a great drummer in that band, but he also can play and sing. And that's sort of a kind of almost Santana-ish flavored
Okay.
Ry Coodery stand-up bass. It started off being a really big band, 9 pieces with 3 percussionists and a sax player and a keyboard player, and it just got too much to handle. And so now we're still going out and gigging. We're still sort of recording here and there, but we're doing it as a 4-piece. It's just much easier to handle.
Wow. Well, it sounds
And
like,
that's playing festivals and stuff, and it's
yeah.
all original stuff, so it's fun.
Yeah. I mean, that's impressive Sounds like you're keeping pretty busy then with your musical career. So
I'm very busy with, yes, I've always got, I mean, usually rehearsing 2 nights a week anyway, Wednesday nights with the Achievers, Thursday nights with Albino Tarantino. And then on most weekends, I'll have a gig or two. And then in the
wow.
summertime, we'll do, I mean, sometimes two in a day, or like last summer we had things where my cover band was on the same bill as one of the original bands, but the
Oh
cover
my
band for the
gosh.
area that we're in is a bigger draw, so we were headlining it, and then I was in the band earlier in the day, and so I definitely keep busy, and I play and practice
Yeah.
almost daily, so I'm really at a much higher level musically than I ever was back in the day when I had a record deal. It's a
Yeah.
shame. I feel like sometime around age 26 or 27, I thought, oh shit, I know what I've got to do. I've got to be much, much better than I am. And
Okay.
then I really buckled down and really just practiced and learned and worked on my vocals and did a function band for sort of 10 years and learned all sorts of different material and wrote jingles and like now it's like finally I'm ready, but it's just, it's too late.
Well, you can start releasing stuff on like Instagram Reels and see if something goes viral. Who knows?
Well, that's the thing, is that the idea of creating content to try
Yeah.
to push the thing forward just leaves me cold. It's just not a comfort zone for me. The guy
Yeah.
that runs the Achievers, he's really, really good at it. He's funny. He's super sharp. He's really adept at making little films. So when we
Yeah.
go on the road with him, he makes, little reels and does funny little side bits that he gets. He has a house clearance business that he does during the week, and he gets these clothes
Yeah.
and gets the harmonica player in the band to model them, and then he takes pictures of, he just has all this content stuff going on, and that's really, it just makes me realize, well, I don't have any of that.
Yeah, I mean, technology changes so fast, and 5 years from now, it'll be something else probably. So, um, yeah, that's just kind of I guess, the way of the world. Things keep moving, and everyone kind of
Yeah, well, I mean,
adjusts.
I've just been working on being the best band member that I would want to be in a band with,
Yeah,
sort of easygoing, no judgment, not difficult,
sure.
um, quick, capable of carrying my own gear, capable of helping with gear,
Yeah,
being being on time, knowing all my parts. I'm like sort of the dream bandmate
yeah,
is what I've sort of arrived at in my old age.
yeah. Well, makes sense. The consistently reliable person. Every band needs that. So, um, what do you say? What do you say is like the best place for people to follow your work then, and all your different bands and what you're doing?
Well, I'm probably just Facebook, and I really I don't post that much, but I'll put songs up when I finish them, and I'll
Okay.
occasionally promote gigs that I'm doing. But I mean, that's the wonderful thing about being in bands with people that do all that work. I don't have to do any of it. They just, with the Achievers, it's just all I really have to do is just show up and be a good bandmate, and Steve, the band leader guy, does everything else. He loves organizing. He wants to be in control.
Yeah,
So he organized the van. He organized, it's so organized when we go on tour. It's just great.
yeah,
He's he's got it down.
yeah. That's awesome.
We've had some really, really good times. It's really fun.
That's perfect. Well, it sounds like you're in a pretty good stage of your career where you can just enjoy the moments and
I really am. It's perfect. And the thing, when I look back on the past, it's just always filled with angst about sort of what we did wrong and just sort of miscommunications, and sort of I remember like really feeling when Till Tuesday had just sort of crested the hill, we just about jumped the shark.
yeah,
And but I still had a publishing deal with a major publisher. I still had connections to the record label. And I was thinking, I'm going to work this. I'm going to get songs and then I'm going to get, and I remember showing up to like ASCAP luncheons in New York, driving all the way to New York and booking a hotel and going to the ASCAP luncheon and sort of shaking hands and, handing cassettes to people and trying to work with the staff people to sort of get songs placed. And
yeah,
it just was so much effort and energy. It's just, to not have to rely on music to try to make a living is really been such a blessing for me, because then the music just becomes, I only do stuff that's fun, that I want
Sure.
to do.
Yeah.
Whereas
Pressure's off.
when you're trying to make a living at it, I was writing jingles for a while, and it's just, or doing function gigs, it's like being a whore, really. You just,
Yeah.
you've got people saying, can you make it like a little more, we want to have a little more like Bob Seger kind of, I keep, just like my third Bob Seger reference, but sort of, they want something that you're not, that's not my thing. Can't you see that what we're doing is like more unique and more sort of personal? But no, that's not what they want. They want it
Yeah.
to fit to a commercial, it's just, it's icky, and it's not something that makes you, that comes out of you naturally, that you feel like you could do really well. Then you just feel like a fish out of water trying to, it's like me trying to do sort of American bro country stuff. It's just not in me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of an issue that continues generation after generation in music, because I mean, there are a lot of uh, sort of pop stars and stuff who are very famous in their eras that once they kind of retire or are no longer really producing stuff actively, they kind of just disappear. It's not necessarily something that newer generations relate to, but they were incredibly famous in the era that they were in. So, and I think a lot of that's probably due to sort of the pressure of fitting into some type of narrative at the time that may not
Yes.
be something that really has lasting power. So,
Yeah, or you have the artists that just are constantly changing and
yes,
reinventing
reinventing.
themselves.
Yeah, that's right. Trying to
That's
fit
what,
in. Yeah. Yeah, I think we see that a lot. And even with musical genres, I've started to see the United States sort of genres merge more and more and become kind of blurry about sort of what's different from a genre. I think a lot of rock has become more poppier. You see a lot of country music that's becoming more rock-like.
yes, right. Don't they even have like rap sections in the middle of some
Yeah,
country songs now?
yes, they have rappers now, and so everything's kind of blending together to a certain extent. It's kind of funny. I mean, like a lot of country music today is really just rock music with a country accent, and,
Right, yeah.
and so it's
With a baritone singer instead of a tenor.
yeah, yeah. So it's just kind of funny. So yeah, the musical genres seem to be pretty blended at this point. I don't know what the future holds for this, and I do wonder, like, sort of what's gonna be the impact of kind of AI and how music's created and produced as well. But yeah, so it'll be interesting to see. Could be a very different production process.
Well, I mean, we're seeing now like some of these hit songs with sort of 6 and 7 writers on it, like
Yeah.
it's a song that's been written by a committee,
Yes.
sitting around a boardroom table and saying, you know, can we have a little bit more? We want some of this and some, just trying to get everything to be
Yes.
everything to everybody.
It's like a company product now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is pretty interesting. So I guess we'll see what happens. But anyway, well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all your experiences and all the contributions, obviously, that you've had on music yourself. I mean, at least in the US, Till Tuesday is something that has definitely had a lot of impact. And as kids are growing up, listening to that in stores they're shopping in or
Yeah, that's
wherever. So,
great. It's great. It really is good.
all right. Well, thanks again. I really appreciate it. I'm
Thank you
going to
very much.